Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Hope you guys are all having a wonderful day. Today's upload is going to be a episode or a video, just me talking about the weather, giving you guys an update, kind of a long range forecast. In today's upload, we will be mainly focusing on the temperature rather than just the precip in terms of the rain, because we could be seeing a cooler fall blast towards the end of September. However, before we do that, before we get into the cold part of September or the potential colder part, we could be seeing many days, even a couple of weeks of warm conditions across much of the country. I mean, some locations could be seeing 90s in the northern states, and this is already halfway through September. We're technically almost in fall. Meteorologically, we are in fall. Astronomically, we're starting in a couple of days on September 21st. So if you like these type of updates, if you like my videos, consider subscribing to my channel, consider liking the video. I always give my reasoning as to why to subscribe. Well, if you just generally enjoy these type of videos, if you enjoy these long-range outlooks, if you enjoy my channel, consider subscribing. It really helps out a lot. So that will be it will be a big favor for me. If you're new, check out my channel, then you could consider. If you're an older turning member, just reminding you that it really helps out a lot when you subscribe. So first off, we need to look at there is Hurricane Florence, or now a tropical depression. I'm fairly sure it has weakened a lot. I mean, it has weakened a ton. It's basically a dead storm at this point. It is just producing quite a bit of rainfall across much of the South Carolina, North Carolina, Western Tennessee, or not Western, Eastern Tennessee, and that quickly moves out. You can see some snow out to the north. This big system dropping a cooler front, not necessarily a cold front. That won't really bring much relief to the hot temperatures, and then you can see this system right here takes up and zooms out into the northeast, the remnants of Hurricane Florence, and drench parts of the northeast with some heavy rain. But a couple days ago, I was talking about how the pattern may be fairly quiet, maybe fairly very, very sedentary, not much going on in the center part of the country, even the western part of the country. That seems to break down as there's going to be a system midweek entering the country with quite a load of moisture and with a lot of things to work with, a lot of moisture brought in by Hurricane Florence. It wraps that thing up into it, and you can see that it just blows up into a massive storm. Lots of heavy rain expected across portions of the northern plains. Could be expecting with this large system, and that necessarily could bring a cooler air mass, but the temperatures warm right back up with the high pressure bringing some calmer conditions. And then towards the end of the month, you could see that the pattern breaks through. It's more of a zonal flow, and then eventually gets down into a trough in the east and a ridge in the west. And you can see a lot of cooler air, marked by that snow, the blue colors, and you can see these huge systems potentially making their way across the country. So that is something that we need to keep an eye on for. And that is just a characteristic of fall. These systems will be getting bigger, stronger, more moisture fueled, not necessarily with the severe thunderstorms, but with the heavy rain and the potential for very strong winds with this in general as a whole system. So if you live somewhere in the plains, northwest Iowa, for example, I know I have a friend that always asks if there's going to be some severe winds, strong winds in northwest Iowa. There could be some with this system approaching on Thursday, September 20th. So if you live in northwestern Iowa, you could be seeing some conditions that could be pretty breezy with some severe weather possible, but mainly just a rain event with some wind with it. So now let's move on to first let me show you the total accumulated precip on this map. You could see that system brings a good dose of rain, up to 4 inches of rain, and then adds in a couple of other systems, add in a couple more inches of moisture. Again, nothing too concerned about flooding. The soil is not too saturated across these parts of the country, so it would take quite a bit of rain and water to saturate these parts of the land. So with this amount, you can see possibly some areas reaching 6 inches or above in the next 384 hours or 10 days. That is, again, could be still overestimated by the GFS and not necessarily true, so not really a big concern. But now let's move to 2-meter temperature anomalies. So let's go back and let's just go skip back to our 0, 0. So this is what it looks right now. And as I was saying, I mean, you could see about in 85% of the country is above average in terms of temperatures. It is very warm. In fact, it is way above average in terms of temperatures for much of the country. And you can see that is where the hurricane remnants are of Hurricane Florence, and that is bringing in some cooler wrapped in air with the thunderstorms. So that is the outflow of these thunderstorms with this rain is just bringing some cooler than average conditions to that country, to the part of the country with the remnants of the storm. But then, I mean, you can see the cold air tries making its way into northern America, northern USA. But I mean, you can see this dome of high pressure. The warm air dominates. Less dense air just stays there and stays in charge. And then finally, with this big system that I was talking about later on, if we go back to the MSLP, precip, and frozen, you can see this is the system I was talking about. With this system right here, midweek, with that giant system, we could be seeing some cooler temperatures. And if we go to 2 meter temperature, where were we? 2 meter temp anomaly, you can see that does bring in some cool. Now we're going back now. This is what you can see. It brings in some cooler air right in here. Temporarily for this upcoming weekend, but it is basically lodged between warm air here and warm air here, so it quickly gets overtaken, and the warm air is back in charge, and way above average conditions are potential for these parts of the nation, and these actually will be life-threatening conditions at some point, because due to the extreme heat, this will still be in the 80s and 90s. So I don't think heat advisories may be posted, but for this time of the year, this is definitely hot. And then finally, you can see this cold front right here defined very nicely. The system is somewhere right here, warm front is somewhere right there, cold front is somewhere right there, and that quickly, the warm air just gets pushed out. I mean, weeks and weeks and days of warm air just gets pushed out by this cold air. So it just shows you how strong this cold air mass could be potentially. And this cold air mass actually stays in for quite a while. It affects areas anywhere east of the Rockies, I would say, the most. And because earlier on with the heat earlier on in September, which we're about to get into, there will be some cooler conditions. I mean, if we move this back, you can see that the cooler conditions are in the western part of the country. But then, as soon as the heat gets moved out into the ocean, it switches patterns. Basically, the warm conditions take control over the west, and the cooler conditions take control over the east. So this is towards the end of September. That's why this video is titled "Towards the End of September We Could See a Cold Fall Blast," and that's basically as far as it goes. And oh wow, okay. So sorry about that. And actually, there have been a couple of models that have been showing that this could persist for quite a long time. You can see that the warm air does seem like it will make its way back, but if we go back to, I think it was yesterday's model run, there was some very below average. I mean, look at that. Very cooler conditions, cold conditions for the beginning of October and end of September. So we could be seriously seeing a cooler fall blast with this. And there are some potential if you go to temperatures. Again, what I'm showing you guys here the whole time are temperature anomalies, not the actual temperatures. So if you go to the actual temperatures, you can see that this is the daytime highs. I mean, you can see daytime highs in the 50s all the way down into central Texas. And then during the nights, we could be seeing 30s and 40s widespread across the country if this cold air mass does organize and takes hold of itself. So I think I do still have time because I want to make this video relatively not too long. Let me check. Yes, I do. I still have a couple of minutes. And let's first look at the 8 to 14 day outlook by the Climate Prediction Center. You can see that this is from September 24th to 30th. Again, Climate Prediction Center tends to have a bias on warm air, so this may not be 100% accurate, but I do agree with the fact that it will be warm for much part of the country through this time frame, except, sorry, I couldn't find a word there, except these conditions will be deteriorating into cooler conditions. These oranges will be overcome by these blue colors, which indicate cooler conditions, and above average precip does seem like a fair bet at this point. So, I do want to bring something up quickly before we go. I was going to show you something about the East Asia rule, which basically shows we could look at eastern parts of Asia and see whether they are below or above average, and look at their geopotential height, their 500 millibar readings, and see if that is below or above average, and whether that is above or below average, we could see that 6 to 8 days later here in the U.S. So that's a very interesting rule. I would want to show you, but I'm running out of time. And before we go, I would like to quickly look at 500 millibar height anomalies. So if you're wondering what on earth this is, what is this 500 millibar thing? Basically what it is that it is a measurement of, and this is the anomaly, so basically it shows you how much above or below average is it at that current time. Above average is it to get to that 500 millibar reading of pressure in the atmosphere. So since warm air is less dense than colder air, with warm air we would need to go farther up into the atmosphere in order to get this 500 millibar reading. And in order to get this 500 millibar reading with cold air, we need to go, usually the millibar readings are typically a little bit lower. So you can see that with this is basically showing how above average, how many meters, I'm fairly sure this is how many meters this is above average in order to get to that 500 millibar reading. It is, and obviously the more we need to go above, we could assume that the warmer the temperatures will be at the surface at that time. So we go through this, and sorry if I didn't explain that well. I'm still in the learning phases of meteorology, so I may not be perfect in explaining things. But we go through time. You can see the warm air, or the assumed warm air, by this very high reading this high reading in pressure in the atmosphere is in charge, and then that gets pushed away by this cooler air mass. You can see that this was actually yesterday's. Let's go back, because I was showing you yesterday's. Let's go back to today's. And so again, not this one again. Okay, so we are looking at this, and we see a very high pressure, high pressure or very high reading of, or higher reading compared to average of pressure in pressure above average, and we can see that gets pushed out by a cooler air mass right there, and that's what could be causing some cooler conditions towards the end of September. So September may end off with a cooler air mass. That is basically the assumptions of this video. Hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you learned something new, and I'll catch you all guys in the next episode.